Well, hello and welcome to yet another one of our Muse presentations and our Nine Muses series, open to all Hellenic pagans, anybody who incorporates Hellenism into their practice, my fellow omnistic polytheistic practitioners. I've really enjoyed doing this series on the Nine Muses. I think it has been very inspirational for all of us. Tomorrow, of course, is our monthly community service for all of our members in our Patreon subscription tiers, $5 and higher. You should have received that email today to see if you wanted to add any petitions to the service. Make sure you get those to me by midnight. But tonight, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here in a second. We are going to be talking about Erato. She is the muse that is really sort of connected to flirtatious creativity, erotic poetry, erotic music. So I was excited about talking about her because I do a separate series on sacred sexuality that is very eros themed. Honestly, if I say those words too much, my tongue starts getting all tied up. So let me pull up our presentation. Here's my fun part, me trying to get my computer to cooperate. Let's see. Oh, yes, I forgot I have little thingies in here tonight. Okay, let's open it up. And I'm still here. That's great because I've been disappearing lately. When I try to do my Zooms, for whatever reason, my little box disappears. So the muses, let's get into it. We are getting into Erato. Why is it not cooperating? Oh my goodness, you guys. Here we go again. Why is, you know what? It's Mercury retrograde, technology issues. I'm saying yes to enable content. Let's see. Oh, it's going to cooperate. Thank you, Mercury. Okay, so let's jump right into it here. All right, so Erato, she is the muse of love songs, love poems, erotic, spell work, confidence and glamour magic for sure. All that influence and persuasion that comes with confidence. Spells to heighten your visibility and attraction. Again, that's your classic glamour work. Glamour work at its core, yes, it is for attraction and acquisition and bringing that air of mystery to a room, kind of drawing things and people into you, but really at its core, it is influence and persuasion. It's about being seen. So I love that about Erato. So she is the inspiration for a lot of love poetry and music with stringed instruments, especially. And as many of you know, I used to play the cello. So all of the muses are kind of dear to me because they do represent stringed instruments and the magic of music. Honing in on what you want. I really think all the muses are sort of, good for that. Sex magic, of course. And then her symbols are wreaths of myrtle and roses, the lyre, and the kithara. Now, tonight, I do have a lot of historical information I'm going to be sharing. I don't know why I went down that path, but as I was putting this together, I realized I put in a lot of historical stuff. So I hope you guys like that. But some of this I might kind of, skip through. I gave you a lot of information. Sometimes I go overboard with the history, but anyways, her name has the same root as Eros, who is the god of desire. Her name does mean a desired, beloved, or lovely. She is the muse of erotic poetry and, of course, love poetry. In most Orphic hymns, it is Erato that charms the sight. So she is kind of like the primary muse in all of those hymns. She's often portrayed again with those roses and holding a musical instrument like the kithara or the lyre, very similar to her sister muses. Both instruments are also often associated with Apollo, the god of the sun, and poetry. Not a lot of people realize Apollo is just not associated with the sun, but very associated with poetry. Some representations do reveal her with doves and arrows. She may also be a companion of Eros, who holds the torch to light desire. So, lots of mythology there to dig into. She does have some really colorful mythology. They all do, but especially Erato. She makes an appearance in the story. Now, there are some stories I'm going to share with you. These are old myth-based stories, but they've persevered through time. One of the stories she's in is it's about this pair of star-crossed lovers. This woman was supposed to marry a man and then ended up having an affair with this other guy. Okay, that's typical everyday stuff, right? So the guy she was supposed to marry was like a tyrant, right? And he found out about the affair and got super, super angry and killed both of them, had them both killed. So their tomb was located on Samos and was considered to be the tomb of Erato. And so that has been a pilgrimage site to this day for lovers throughout the age of not only Pausanias, but now it's actually still, if you Google research it, a place that you can visit. So I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to share it with you. Okay, so Plato, of course, we all know Plato. I don't want to put my face in front of her face. He mentions Erato lots of times, especially in Virgil's Aeneid. He dedicates the second part of the Iliad to her and invokes her at the beginning of the seventh book to inspire him, Plato himself. So she was said to make those who were guided by her to be wanted and worthy of being loved. Again, through inspiration, through confidence, through glamour magic, right? She carries the essence of the arts within her, so her origins are very divine in nature, same as the other muses. Again, she's a daughter of Zeus, so she's going to have that divinity. So, I mean, it's just par for the course. But she wasn't only revered as a muse. There are lots of stories that highlight her that are very versatile over the years. One version tells of Erato as being a nymph from this Nereid group, right? And who in ancient times were prophets to the god Pan. And so, she is kind of represented with a lot of different names and faces over the years. So there was a sanctuary there where people would seek advice from these oracles. And Erato has also been noted as the wife of Arcas and mother of three sons. So there's actually more stories I'll share with you tonight, just little blips, but she probably out of all the muses has the most ancient literature that references her. Sometimes it's hard to find the muses in ancient literature, but she's all over the place. Okay. All right. So she appears in the story of the Thespiads, the 50 daughters of the Thespius. She, in that story, ends up having children with Hercules. So she, births sons to him. So she has like a relationship there. She's also depicted sometimes again with turtle doves and a golden arrow, and that is to symbolize the feeling of eros, which is love that she inspires. Um, and I thought I put the picture here with her with the golden arrows, but whenever you see one of the muses, or a divinity, a feminine divinity with their boob hanging out and a golden arrow, that's Erato. She's the boob out with the golden arrow, you guys, and the old ancient art. Um, all right. So this is, I really kind of didn't want to dive too deeply into the Greek magical papyri, but I did a little bit tonight just because a lot of the love spells, sex spells, the magical formulas that are connected to Erato, the muse, come actually from that Greek magical papyri. So most of the spells that reference Erato are preserved in this, it's called Papyrus 121. It's a magical handbook, right? It's presumed to be from 4th century Egypt. I think originally it was about 2 meters long, and it contains spells for all kinds of purposes, everything from healing to binding to protection, success. But there were a lot of love and sex magic spells in there that were attributed to Erato, the muse. So I did want to share some of those tonight just for, funsies, right? I don't think you're going to be able to find some of the things that you need. I know I probably wouldn't be able to with some of these spells, but they're interesting to be able to kind of identify and pick apart and even maybe work with in the here and now, like in a revised format. So a fetching love spell. So love spells often have titles, especially when we're talking about Greek love spells or Roman love spells that define their nature in more detail. So one of the most frequent types are the love spells that lead, quote unquote. So in ancient Greek, you guys, my pronunciation of Greek is ridiculous. Agagamon, I think it's from the verb ago. So it means to lead. I could be totally butchering that. If you're Greek and you're watching this, totally PM me if I'm butchering it. So this type of spell had the aim of bringing the target to the person performing the magic. So it's a fetching love spell. So one of these spells instructs the user to take a seashell, write holy names, the blood of a black donkey, and recite a formula. So sacred words, sacred syllables, kind of like Buddhist magic, you guys, to attract the target. So the user or the caster should select the time to perform this ritual very carefully as the spell had immediate effect, meaning that person would be fetched immediately. So that's just one example from the Greek magical papyri. Um, so magical words, again, there are these correlations. That's why I'm omnistic. You know, I look for correlations in magical practices. And Tibetan Buddhist magic lies heavily in mala and mantra work, which is sacred words, sacred syllables. And again, when you look at the old Greek and Roman ancient spells, especially the ones associated with the Muses like Erato, you find the same thing. You find magical words. It's called voces magicae. I'm probably butchering that. I'm just going to do my best, you guys. So these are like constantly recurring in the magical papyri, these magical words. So they're unintelligible sequences of words or syllables thought to have magical power. So one spell believed to obtain the eternal love of a woman on the spot by invoking the god Labo displays some magical words at the end. So if you ever spend some time on Google researching it, they actually have the images online. I don't know Greek. I don't know how to read ancient Greek. If you do, you know, I'm sure I could probably spend time translating it online, but I didn't. But definitely, if you're interested in learning more, these resources are online. So are translators. So you can like look that up and translate it. Magical signs known as charcuteries. I always want to say a charcuterie, whatever, that board. You know what I'm talking about? Like the board with the meat and the cheese. What is that called? Charcuterie? Charcuterie. And when I see this word, I want to say that word, and it's not the same. Anyway, moving on. I'm not good at Greek, you guys. All right. So powerful tool, magical signs. So these symbols often had the shape of asterisks or lines ending in small circles. So we see that a lot with these old spells. Ancient love spells make use of those signs all the time. So again, if you want to Google this, by all means. These often were associated or described as an excellent love charm or literally a potion, which they referred to as philtron. So those signs themselves were considered a formula, potion, or love charm, kind of like talismanic work now. So in one of these, there was an entry that a tin lamella should be engraved with some magical signs and names, rolled up with some magical material, perhaps a lock of hair or piece of clothing, and thrown into the sea. The practitioner should also remember to use a copper nail from a wrecked ship for writing those magical signs and names. So this again, another love spell, another love formula requiring some hard to find items. You know, you got to go get a copper nail from a wrecked ship, for example. That might be a little difficult. And to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what the lamella is. I did some Google research on that and I found a lot of different weird things that I don't think were it. Anyway, moving on. Again, tonight was part history lesson just for funsies. So, invoking deities for help is another common feature of these old love spells, as it is now. Today, that has remained unchanged. Special invocation to Selene, the moon, because you remember in ancient Greek times, they often reference the moon as Selene. So, one of these spells is in the Greek papyri. So, addressing Selene as the mistress of the entire world, the caster was instructed to make offerings to her by molding a mixture of clay, sulfur, and blood of a dappled goat. I'm not sure what that means. Into a figurine of the goddess, and by consecrating a shrine made of olive wood, which should never face the sun. As a result, Selene would send a holy angel who would drag the target by their feet and hair to the caster. The target would be fearful and sleepless because of their love for the individual performing the magic. Success was guaranteed as the power of the spell was so strong, according to the papyrus. So very interesting. Here I actually started including where you can find this in the Greek magical papyri. So portions of this lunar spell to bind and attract the target and obtain their eternal love is in Papyrus 121, second verso, columns 8 through 9, number 25-6. So I'm trying to help you guys with your research. If you are interested in learning more about this, I wanted to give you a little bit more, you know, of a direction there. I don't know why I love this piece of art so much. This is Erato, and look at her. She's just smacking this cherub out of her face. Like, I'm tired of your shit. Get on out of here. You guys are irritating the shit out of me. All right. Among the objects featuring in magical rituals are also those of daily use. So, one of the spells in the Greek papyri is called a good drinking cup spell. Now, over a cup, the caster was to repeat magical words 7 times. These are believed to be holy names of Cyprus, that is, Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Now, remember, she had different names. A lot of these deities in different periods of time historically have had different names. So always remember that. Users or casters of the spell hoped that the loved one's heart could be reached and their love would be returned. So the good cup spell with the formula to be recited over the cup is located in Papyrus 121 in column 8. So that's some help there if you want to look that one up. Here's another one. And she's just kind of like looking at the cherub like, geez, every time I turn around, my tits are out and you're up my ass. Hang on. All right. Okay, spells I'm in a mood tonight, you guys. I'm a little slap happy. Spells may have been accompanied by drawings to serve as a model for performing the ritual. For example, a picture is mentioned in one of the spells, although the papyrus itself did not preserve it, which kind of sucks. So if you are researching the Greek papyri, you will notice that some of the spells do have diagrams that are supposed to be there, but they haven't been preserved. Either they've been destroyed or eroded over time, or I feel like some of them were intentionally removed or destroyed over time. That's just me. I'm being a conspiracy theorist, but this spell was to take a shell from the sea and draw on it with myrrh ink the figure of Typhon, and in a circle write his names and throw it into the heating of a bath. But when you throw it, keep reciting these words engraved in a circle and attract to me her, you would say her name, whom that person's mother bore. So say I was trying to do a spell on Madison and I'm her mom, Michelle. I would be like, attract to me her, Madison, whom Michelle bore. So it's in these older spells, a lot of them you will notice, not only are you naming the target, but you're naming the target's mother or father or both. So again, they were focused on targeting. So on this very day, from this very hour on, with her soul and heart aflame, quickly, quickly, immediately, immediately. You'll notice that too. Lots of repeating words at the end of spells, at the end of the incantation, incarnate. You guys, I'm telling you, I have not done it. I have not drank. I have not smoked any cannabis. I don't know what my problem is tonight. Instructions for attracting the target straight away are in Papyrus 121, column 10. I am out of it. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. Let me move me again. Look at me. I love this. This is me. This is my Yule, one of my many Yule logos, my Saturnalia logos for this year. I love how that turned out. All right, so here's another fetching spell. Remember, we call those agage. Was believed to work with unmanageable targets, so we call those stubborn targets now, right? So the names of 7 great gods should be written with myrrh on 7 wicks of a lamp, which ought not to be read. The lamp was lit and had wormwood seeds on top. A formula should then be recited. That's, again, sacred words, sacred syllables. The victim or the target would be sleepless until they reached the practitioner's house. This would happen by the time the 7th wick flickered. So this was a love spell that could fetch someone even from across the sea. That is in Papyrus 121, verso column 1, numbered 18. Oh, here's a fun one. So some of these are more, this is not papyrus. Hang on, let me go back, you guys. I just wanted to move this little box here out of the way. This is me too, but I don't like the logo guy that I use. Look at how old he made my face. I mean, I guess I am pushing 50, but I just didn't like it, so I didn't use it for a lot this year, but it's cute, I guess. Anyway, this is a more recent, not in the papyri, Roman Greek love spell. This is a love spell to compel a person to you. You would need a bowl of honey, some fresh fruit, like apples or pomegranates are preferable here. Cut those up. A fire safe plate, a red candle, a pen, nail, or some kind of tool to carve into the candle with, a piece of parchment paper and pen. And if you have like a love deity oil, and that could be called many different things. Like I have an Oshun oil I use, which would be my goddess of love oil, but that's optional. So to begin, you would basically carve the name of your love interest into the candle. You'd anoint the candle with your oil if you're using oil, making sure that you draw that oil up towards the wick. You would place the candle on an appropriate candle holder or a fire safe plate, and you're going to surround that candle with your cut fruit. You're going to get your piece of parchment paper and write out the following petition. You're going to name the person, your target, and you're going to write, may you be sent to me to fulfill my commands. Let, again, write their name. Love me with a divine, indelible love. You're going to light the candle. After the candle is lit, you're gently going to pour the honey onto the fruit and say the following. Again, you're going to recite their name. May you ignite with sweet passion. Now take your piece of parchment paper and burn it in the flame and recite the following. May your heart and soul burn for me. Again, this is a more this is not ancient. This is more, it's not new. It's an older spell, but it is a Greek or Roman, Greco-Roman pantheon, muse related love working. All right. Oh, what'd you guys think of this one? This one's he did okay here. I like that one. Anyway. All right, here's another more recent Roman Greek love spell. It's a spell to bind a lover. So you're going to need, again, a piece of parchment paper, 2 red candles. You're going to be melting these down. So here's a little bit of advice I'll give you. Almost every town across America has a sex shop, head shop, something that sells, novelties. Or jump online. The internet is a great resource. They have their body play candles. They're for sex, for people that want to get freaky. But here's the nice thing with those candles. You can buy them. They burn very quickly. The wax is very pliable. So when those candles burn down, because they're body wax safe, it is wax, but it's very moldable. It cools very quickly. It doesn't burn like a traditional wax burns. I would recommend using these body wax candles. They sell them, like they sell the big ones, like all different colors, red, black, white, red, pink, whatever. And they're big pillar candles, and they will burn quickly, and the wax is just very workable. All right, so 2 red candles. A bound to me oil can be any kind of binding oil. So for binding works, a lot of times I use a St. Michael oil. I use a San Simon oil. I make those myself. You can probably find a variety of binding oils, from your local practitioner, or find recipes. You could really make your own. And it's optional. You don't need to use a binding oil if you don't want to. You will need a clay pot. So begin here's the thing about clay pots. Where's a great place to source these? Your local Goodwill, your local Salvation Army, your local St. Vincent de Paul. They usually have, the secondhand stores. You can find a lot of clay pots, in honestly a lot of different things you can use for conjure that doesn't cost a lot of money. Okay, so begin by taking your piece of parchment and write the following. Seize the name of your target and lead them to me, loving me with mad desire. Bind, him or her with shackles. Do not allow their name to eat, drink, sleep, or laugh, but make, again, their name, leave behind any other until he or she comes to me. Very, very forceful, right? Then you're going to melt both candles until the wax is turned into a liquid. Let it cool until it is malleable. Again, body wax candles are wonderful for this, you guys. Then you're going to make 2 wax figures, one that represents your love interest and one that represents you. As you mold the figures, add a few drops of love binding oil into the wax figure that represents your love interest. Okay, so once the figures are formed, mold them together. Or I like to do arms, like make little arms, make them holding each other. You don't have, or if you're not good at that, if you can't make arms or legs that wrap around each other, just kind of from the waist up, just kind of, I would make like them joined at the waist down, kind of make that like a strong central, and then have their torsos coming up. Um, it reminds me of that movie I just watched with oh gosh, I can't remember his name now. I think it's called Together. It was like a horror movie. Wait a minute. I've got to Google it now. I just seen it in the theater not too long ago. Um yes, it is called Together. Oh my gosh, why is it doing all this? And it stars, I don't know his name, Dave Franco, and his real life girlfriend. Anyway, I'm not gonna ruin the movie for you, but this spell reminds me of that movie. You should watch that movie. Anyway, it's a horror movie, but more of like a mental horror movie, or somebody, if you're afraid of commitment, it could also be a horror movie for you, anti-commitment phobes. Okay, so once the figures are formed, mold them together so they're embracing each other. Take your parchment paper and wrap it around the embracing wax figures and stick this in the clay pot and bury it in a graveyard. Now, graveyard burials can be difficult these days, right? Um, if you are able to bury it in a graveyard, I always encourage burying it near the gates and leaving 9 pennies. I've talked about that before. Um, Other options besides a graveyard, I know in the Greek and Roman text it says graveyard, but there are lots of types of burial grounds, in the woods, in the forest, creeks, rivers, natural burial grounds, can be insects, animals. There's a lot of things that can be burial grounds. So anyway, I'm just giving you there's options if you can't do a graveyard. If you're going to try this spell, reach out to me. I'll give you some other options. Out of all the forms of love magic that existed in the Greco-Roman world, the two most common were Eros and Philia. So unlike Eros, which was more commonly used by men, Philia magic was utilized by women and others who were considered to be social inferiors. Okay. So since there was an emphasis on service to the state in Greco-Roman culture, kind of like now, right? Isn't it insane how things come full circle? Like it's crazy right now. Anyways, these social inferiors felt like they were doing their country a service, right? So if a woman was capable of repairing her broken marriage and improving her husband's interactions with the neighbors through magic, society was benefiting as a whole. So despite the protective purpose seen by women, philia spells were looked down on by men. Surprising? They were a great source of anxiety because men saw them as tools used by the social inferiors to hijack power from the male dominated hierarchy. It is what it is, you guys. It's history. And boy, does it like to repeat itself. Am I right? I'm right. Oh, here's a male. This is Brigley. I don't know if any of you have interacted with him. He's White Dragon Healing. He does hardship life coaching. He's Asa True, so he's a Norse pagan. All right, let me move my screen again so I can. Brigley's not like that, though, are you, Brigley? You better not be. I don't think so. Okay. Through the use of spells, women were hoping to bring out the pleasant personal qualities of their significant others and make them increasingly submissive in order to strengthen their bond, right? The spells consisted of many objects found in the everyday life of a woman. So this would include things like narcotics, because you got to remember, those were readily available back in the day and prescribed, amulets, rings, knotted cords, and even facial ointments. So although the violent and passionate images typically depicted in Eros, those were not found in Philia. Okay, so it's important to remember that, like Eros, the ultimate purpose of Philia magic was to take control of the target, but in a much gentler way. So, wine was considered to be the most basic love potion by the Greeks, and it had to be handled with as much care as any other spell. This was because the conjurer had to gauge the effectiveness of the serving size. So, the right amount of wine would lead to sexual arousal, too much would lead to impotence, right? Herbal aphrodisiacs and mood enhancers like cyclamen, oleander, mandrake, these were also used in combination with wine for enhancement. So that's an interesting little FYI if any of you are interested in some of these practices, right? This is me and my girls. Here's me. I've lost about 100 pounds since then, but there's Manders, Kenzie, Maddie, Lainey. Here we are. Anyway, so narcotics used in potions were designed to sedate men in progressive stages, beginning with cheerfulness, right? Sexual arousal, we call that cheerfulness, progressing to the weakening of vitality, and finally ending with sleep. Potions were placed in one of two categories, either an irritant or those used to increase relaxation and affection. So, as with all narcotics, there was always a risk of severe harm or death being caused by accidental overdose. So, the effects of the two potion categories were really difficult to distinguish in small doses, but not in large amounts, right? Because substantial doses of irritants would cause cramping, pain, insomnia, while the relaxants really led to just drowsiness and eventually a loss of consciousness. Um, and that was pretty common, you guys. Dosing was all over the place back then. There's lots of crazy stories. Okay, so, oops. You know what? I don't know why these damn screen things won't just cooperate. Like it's always some bullshit with these things. Hang on, you guys. All right, there we go. Rings and gemstones. Okay, so basically I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Please don't shoot the person trying to pronounce it. Cyrenides, a Greek manual focusing on magical properties. That's another one you can Google and research. There are descriptions of different gemstones that were thought to possess certain powers. So in Greek and Roman magic, you're going to find the use of a lot of these. So dendrites, for example, that led to the love of the gods and success in the world. Sapphire, that resulted in a victory in every lawsuit brought against you. Arizon, effective around leaders when placed within a golden ring. There were many cases in Greek and Neo-Assyrian cultures where social inferiors would stand before their superiors armed only with a magical stone set in a ring. This is a true story. They were hoping that the rings would increase their goodwill and help them build favorable relationships with the hierarchy. So, lots of these historical talismans, these amulets are rings. Even if you look back at the old grimoires, referencing Solomon and Solomon's rings, and making them to work with the goetic or really kind of try to control the goetic, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't agree with enslavement of spirit, period, but rings were a big deal. A little ring for success and for charm, which they reference as charis, and for victory, right? So the world had nothing better than this, right? For when you have it with you, you will always get whatever you ask from anybody. Besides, it calms the angers, which they refer to as orgai, of kings and masters. So wearing it, whatever you may say to anyone, you will be believed and you will be pleasing to everybody. And so this is me referencing that Arizon or Arezusa stone ring. So that's just an example from some of the old ancient scripts. And I'm kind of breaking this down because it's all kind of related to Eros or Erato. This is a sigil to promote sexual pleasure. Some of you may recognize that if you have had me do work or any kind of puppetry for you. It's one of my favorite sigils to use when I am working sex magic. So let me move me out of the way. All right. These little boxes, you guys, I don't know how I get rid of them. How do I get rid of them? If anybody knows, please PM me because I'm tired of dealing with this Zoom bullshit every week. All right, erotic services in ancient Egypt. Now, again, when we think of Erato, one of the nine muses, we think of Roman and Greek times, but there is that Egyptian crossover, okay? So, love spells, there was an intermingling of ancient energy, Egyptian, Roman, Greco at this time. So, erotic services, which is attributed to Erato, were an important subsector of ancient ritual service markets. Now, many months ago in our Sacred Sexuality series, I did talk about that. I talked about the sex priestesses in Egypt, the sex temples, and this really kind of is part of that. I'm not going to dive too deeply into that because I did like an hour and a half presentation on that a couple months ago. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it, but it was a very important part of ancient ritualistic service in the service markets back then. So, among a collection of ritual service texts from Egypt from about the second to the fifth century, roughly 20% concern love and sex. Now, men's love interests in general differed very much from women's love interests, right? With social circumstances really constraining men and women's sexual activity during that time. So, spells for men really dominated among love spells directly seeking sex. So, if you categorize the love spells from across the ancient Mediterranean world, again, this is history, this is kind of doing research. 87% of love spells directly were seeking sex, written by men for male spell users. So, an example of one of those ancient spells for a man would be the Pudenda key spell. So you take an egg of a crow and the juice of the plant crow's foot and the gall of a river electric eel, and you grind them all with honey, and you say the spell whenever you grind and whenever you smear it on your genitals. So again, magic words. And the spell that would be spoken would be, I say to you, womb of Madison, we'll just make up her name, open and receive the seed of I, Hercules, and the uncontrollable seed of the RFA, RFA. You have to write it out. I don't even think it's can be pronounced. It's nonsensical. You're supposed to write it. Let her, Madison, love me for all time as Isis loved Osiris, and let her remain chaste for me as Penelope did for Odysseus. And do you, womb, remember me for all the time of my life, because I am Arkanaka, blah, 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 blah. Another word that can't be pronounced. It's nonsensical, but it is to be written. Okay. So the man would say this while grinding all that stuff together, and then he'd be rubbing his genitals. I think he'd be masturbating, and the texts don't say that, but they kind of imply that. And in this way, he would be able to have intercourse with the woman he wished. Madison uses an example here, and she would love him alone, and no one else would, she wouldn't sleep with anybody else. She would never have sex with anybody else, only you. It's a very kind of dominating love spell, but also really a sex spell at the heart of it. So this spell's focus was on the spell user's penis. So that's not an idiosyncrasy. That is very par for the course back then. Any of you that have studied Egyptian magic, Osiris's penis is like an important element in the love story of Isis and Osiris. And other love spells also involve smearing material on the user's penis. So the sexual biology that generates that male paternity uncertainty also tends to generate male concern about the sexual fidelity of the female. So this is, again, if you look back at what this spell is having you speak, she will love you alone, and by no one will she ever be laid, just by you alone. This is like wanting to solidify fidelity. So that was a concern of men back then. A sense of powerful agency also typically supports the male sexual self-confidence, right? So in this spell, that psychological need is expressed with a conjunction of the user's seed or semen and magical uncontrollable seed, as well as with the imperative womb, remember me for all the time of my life, right? So this, it's kind of like a narcissistic, I'm a narcissist, come have sex with me and nobody else ever, just die loving me spell. So while male love spell users were very interested in having sex, they weren't really interested in having sex with just any woman, right? So female prostitutes were more readily available than were providers of erotic spells. And again, this is in that time period after the sex priestesses and the sex temples were destroyed. And in between time, there was a lot of former sex priestess temple workers that became female prostitutes, and there was only a handful left that really were doing erotic spells because they were being persecuted and executed. So the prostitutes also probably did provide faster, cheaper, and more reliable service than the erotic spell providers at that time. Erotic spells, however, did serve the needs of men interested in having sex with a very specific woman that the man selected from the general population. So the men's genital focus existed in conjunction with their interest in that specific person, that specific woman. And that's where you would see those spells that required that activity. Now, switching gears, here's another sigil I use quite often in lust and sex works. Again, I was taking more of a historical approach tonight because Erato is sex magic. She is that erotic inspiration. And so I wanted to take a step back and look at the history of that. Now, love spells for females tended to be oriented to gaining affection rather than sex, and that's kind of par for the course these days, too. So here's the first part of an ancient love spell for a female user. And I put some names in here. I will bind you, Nilos, who is called Agathos Daemon, whom Demetria bore with great evils. So right off the bat, we're naming his name, we're naming his mother's name. So we're really zeroing in on this individual. Neither gods nor men will procure a clean getaway for you. On the contrary, you will love me, Capitolina, she's saying her name now, whom Pepperus bore, her mother's name, with a divine passion, and in every way you will be for me an escort as long as I want, that you might do for me what I wish and nothing for anyone else, and that you might obey no one save only me, Capitolina, and that you might forget your parents, children, and friends. It is a very female thing to do. She really obviously needs a lot of attention. She's attention neglected. So looking at this historical spell, the first sentence of that spell is really kind of conventional. It's very conventional for these types of ritual services back then. But the next two sentences kind of seem like a transcription of Capitolina's oral request, right? Petitioning. It requests, the request describes love without physical like specifications. Love me with a divine passion, basically. It primarily concerns attention, forget your parents, children, and friends. And there's a general request for personal services, be for me an escort, do for me what I wish, obey no one save only me. So obviously she wants other kind of provisional services here. And then the rest of the spell really consists of really fairly conventional spell text along with restatements of the request for attention and affection. But again, I wanted to kind of pick these apart with you tonight so you had a historical lens and how, I mean, we're going back how many, millennia here, or millennia, oh my gosh, you guys, we're going back into deep ancient history here. And this gives you a good point of reference for your spell formulas now that you may be working on. A lot of this has been tried and true, and a lot of this is done very similarly today. I mean, yeah, we've tweaked some things, but there are a lot of similarities. Now, anybody who's had me do a sex hex, you're familiar with that. That's for the male sex hex work I do. So accomplish everything for me and rush in and take away the mind of Nilos, to whom this magical material belongs, in order that he might love me, Capitolina, and that Nilos, whom Demetria bore, might be inseparable from me every hour and every day. Bind Nilos, who is also Agathos Daemon, whom Demetria bore, to me, Capitolina, whom Papyrus bore, for this whole life. Nelis shall love me with an eternal affection, immediately, immediately, quickly, quickly. So remember earlier I told you there's a lot of repetition of those words at the end. A lot of repetition here of not just her name, but her target's name, and then his more like politically correct, birth name, his mother's name, her mother's name. She's really zeroing in that targeting, right? Because they didn't have photos. We do photos now, but back then that wasn't the case. So the spell describes spirits releasing all who have drowned. Oh, I'm sorry. I kind of skipped over something here, right? Okay, so in this part of the spell, something I wanted to point out is that when you're petitioning, you don't want to be overly desperate. You want to state your intent and kind of walk away from it, right? You don't want to get too desperate. So this spell describes in spirit basically releasing all who have drowned, have died unmarried, and have been carried away by the wind. And that's a Roman Greco thing that we see that populates frequently in these spells. Committing suicide was actually, that was a big problem back then, like it is now. without using instruments that break the surface of the body. So, like drowning oneself, it was more typical of female suicides than male suicides at the time. And dying unmarried indicated a lack of affiliation, not necessarily lack of sex, not necessarily a lack of sex. So these distinctive references really kind of may represent Capitolina's. There's kind of like a suicidal ideation and her fears for her life's end. So, in any case, the primary focus on affiliation and affection characterizes love spells for female users compared to those for male users. So, a lot of the older spells will have some desperation undertones because that was kind of a step before potentially a drowning suicide. There was stigma to being unmarried. There was stigma there's a lot of stigma back then, like there is now. And people who believed in spirit work and did spirit work, they would kill themselves in ways where they weren't hurting the body. So drowning was very popular. And you would hear like kind of like that desperation tone in some of these old spells right before an incident like this. So the social and familial position of women in the ancient Mediterranean world um, it did actually constrain women's opportunities to have sex with men for whom they developed an erotic passion. I don't know why I wrote did not, but it did. That's a spelling error. My apologies. That's confusing. But erotic love spells sought to generate intense suffering in the spell target, usually a woman, if it was from a man. And the passion would prompt the spell target to come to the spell user, usually a man. Let me move forward here. And oh, and anybody who's done the sex on a female, you're familiar with that. That's another one of my sigils I use. But attract, inflame, destroy, burn, cause her to swoon from love as she is burnt and inflamed. Sting the tortured soul, the heart of Carosa, whom Thello bore. This is an example again, using names again for targeting, until she leaps forth and comes to Apollos, whom Theonila bore. Again, his name, his mother's name. Out of passion and love, whenever I throw you myrrh as you burned, so also will you burn her, the spell's target. Seek out her, again, your target, and open her right side and enter like thunder, like lightning, like a burning flame, and make her thin, pale, weak, limp until she leaps forth and comes to me. Again, Apollos, the one casting. So love spells targeting women focused on motivating them to leap forth and not on enabling them to do so. It was more forced. So among the elite women who probably predominated, among erotic spell targets, they were probably targeted most often because they were elite. And it's kind of like I don't see a lot of that now. Historically, like there was, if you were in the public eye, you were really targeted. Very rarely do I do targeted work on a celebrity, once in a great while, but very rarely. So what governed their erotic passion was within their minds and bodies and not the social circumstances objectively around them. So again, this is kind of a historical glimpse into what these spells are, why they are the way they are, who used them, building blocks for your own practice. I think if you want to have a strong practice, you need to know what the building blocks are in a practice. And if you follow Hellenism, this is a great way to learn so that you can incorporate these elements. So other things, this is Terpsichore, Terpsy, and I'm not pronouncing her name right. Her name is Terpsy. The actual Greek pronunciation is Terpsichore or something like that. But this is her, again, boob out. Now, I'm mentioning her tonight because this is Erato's sister. This is another one of the nine muses. Now, she's associated with gym witchery, fitness magic, trance dance magic, physical body magic, and very similar aspects as Erato. Now, what I did not touch on with Erato was she is affiliated to miming or pantomiming, which is using the body to manifest really inspiration and creativity. So I wanted to mention Terpsy here because she also, like Erato, kind of is connected to manifesting with the physical body through physical acts, like trance dance. So I wanted you to have access to that. I didn't deep dive it onto Erato because I deep dived it into when I did Terpsy. And so this is her YouTube video. I do have it on YouTube. I kind of break it down here. Let's see if I thought I flagged it for the trans stance. Maybe I didn't, you guys. I didn't. Okay. My apologies, but it's on YouTube. If you're interested in learning more about using the physical body to produce or manifest magic, check out Terpsy's video. Arato also has affiliations there, but because I just did, that big, huge hour and a half video, I wasn't going to jump into it tonight. Okay, stop it. All right. Now this one is Polyhymnia. Okay, so another sister to Erato and Terpsy, another one of the Muses. She is associated with sacred poetry, same as Erato. Erato is, they'll say erotic poetry, but really all of the poetry kind of has erotic love undertones with the Muses. So if you wanted to, and again, I wasn't going to deep dive into that because I did an hour and a half segment when I did Polyhymnia about sacred poetry. So the same information applies for Erato, this muse. Now, Polyhymnia's video is also on YouTube. This is her right here. I really liked Polyhymnia's video because I do go into sacred poetry exercises, and then I actually walk you through spell crafting with spells or poems, I'm sorry, using sacred poems to cast spells and do all sorts of beautiful, wonderful things. So if you're interested in that, that is an attachment of Erato. So if you work with Erato, that is in her wheelhouse, but I did include that in her sister Polyhymna's presentation because it's also her wheelhouse. You'll notice the muses, they're nine sisters that share many different things, right? They all have their primary wheelhouses and their secondary wheelhouses. And those secondary wheelhouses are all interlaced between all the sisters. Okay, so we also have our sacred sexuality series. And so tonight I took more of a historical step here and I shared historical spells and belief systems and the politics behind them because that is part of Erato. However, I didn't break down a lot of the modern sex magic spells or the modern love spells because I do that in our sacred sexuality series. Now, there are a variety of EDUs on our YouTube. There's 4 links right here. In each one of these, I talk about sex magic, and especially the last couple of ones that I've posted, those have been basic sex crafts. So that's a collection of like 20 to 25 different spells for sex magic, love magic, self-love. Here's one example. I think this is one of my more recent videos that are on YouTube for you. I'm just kind of looking for a spell here as an example. First date blessing, surviving a dry spell without sex. So, boy, I'm loud in these. But yeah, so here's some links. If you want to really dive into wanting to know spell formulas for modern day practice, modern day use, check out any of our YouTube videos. And you can also join our Sacred Sexuality series. It's $25 a month in terms of a subscriber fee on our Patreon. But then every month you're going to get that unique content emailed directly to you. And then you can, have access to all different types of libraries worth of spells. And that, my friends, is it. Of course, I want to thank all my Patreon members for making this possible. Each and every month, I love producing content for you guys. I love teaching. I love, sharing knowledge, exchanging energy with all of you, especially our Nine Muses, series. That it's very creative, very inspirational. I know I've grown since starting it. I'm sure many of you have as well. Plus, I love Hellenism. There's just something about Hellenic paganism in general that is just a beautiful, wonderful practice. And so Again, thank you to all my Patreon members that are in the $5 a month tier and higher for this service. I do appreciate it. If you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here for it, you guys. Other than that, stay magical. And I can't close this out. Stay magical.